Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar this morning for preparing for R14 in the new academic year. We are a few minutes before 11 o'clock, so I'll just wait another couple of minutes for everybody to join us, and then we'll get started when we get to 11. Right, it's 11 o'clock now, so let's get started on today's webinar. Um, I'll just start by going over a few housekeeping things for everybody. We will be recording the webinar and uploading a copy to the Help Centre so it can be shared with your colleagues if anyone's not able to attend. You are all on mute, so if you have any questions or queries, please pop them in the questions or the chat section where relevant on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar where it would be possible to have some of those questions that you've raised answered. But please be assured if we don't have time to answer all your questions, we'll make sure a response is provided as part of the follow-up to the webinar. And if you have specific queries, we'll do individual follow-ups with you. So before we move on, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Georgina, Head of Implementation. I'm going to be facilitating the webinar this morning, as well as discussing some recent updates to our quality Power BI reports. But I'm delighted to introduce Angela to you, who will be the main presenter today. Angela has a long track record of managing information, funding and compliance within the training sector, and she'll be sharing some of her personal and Aptem experience with you to help you navigate through this very busy time of year. So without further delay, I will hand you over to Ange.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're feeling well this morning. Welcome to our webinar on R14 and various different functionality to enable you to prepare for the new academic year. It seems that as we come into the end of an academic year and the start of a new year, there are so many tasks that we need to cope with. So what we're hoping today is to help you to prepare your funding rules, new programs, new organisational structure, that kind of thing. And just talk about how far in advance we should be preparing for the new year. It sometimes seems that in preparing for next year, we need to start preparing the whole year in advance at least. So today we aim to get you thinking around the new thinking around how Aptem functionality can help you to manage these tasks in a more timely and structured way. So what we'd like you to do at this moment in time is to just take a couple of minutes now to think about any activities that you feel that you're faced with as the year end approaches, and just make a little note of the 3 key priorities that you feel that you need to work on. As we go through the webinar, then we'll ask you to begin to consider all of the different areas in relation to your key priorities for you and your organisation as you prepare for the end of the academic year and your brand new year as well. So the first things we want you to consider are the impact of any changes in the areas that we've currently got listed in the screen. So With regards to your programs, your onboarding, delivery and sub-programs, are there any changes or updates that's required to any of them? And what are the impact of those changes as well? So potentially looking at the funding rules and compliance documents templates, are there any changes that you need to look at for those? Things like onboarding wizard, your compliance documents, are there any updates in your compliance documents? Is there anything within the funding rules that determines whether or not you need to update any of your additional information? Or any of the commitments from yourselves, employers, that kind of thing. One thing that's been key in coming through and conversations we've been having at the moment is in regards to sort of block delivery and you're off the job, front loaded, anything like that, that we've suggested that you could put into your additional information section within your learning plan template. So that's one thing to maybe consider updating within your programs and your delivery programs. If you've got any new versions of standards coming through, qualification criteria, please ensure that you're requesting any changes timely to give us opportunity to build them in time for when you're ready to onboard. We do suggest 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks if it's a busy period, which it tends to be around about this time, to allow us to get all of that information showing for you in the system. So we just want you to consider that as part of your changes that you may need to prepare. Along with that, is there any changes in curriculum delivery? Have you been reviewing your programs? Do you need to update any of the content that's within your components? Are there any EPAO requirements, changes, that kind of thing? Do we need to be reconsidering your gateway reviews, endpoint assessment information that's currently listed within your components? All of these areas are things to consider in preparation for year end. There's also potential for changing, obviously, your ILR and your processes around that, reviews, competencies, qualification aims, any of those things that need updating. And if you're using qualifications and certification as well, is there anything else you need to add into your qualifications section? Okay, moving on. Other things that we think that may be important is, as we've said, updating your reviews and your competencies. Is there any changes there that you need to make? Always remember that you need version control around your reviews and competencies. If these are areas that you've used for learners previously, always do a second version or a point version, a 0.2 version, 0.3 version. Rather than make a change to the originals. You don't want to be making any changes to the original reviews and competencies and delete any data or for any of the learners that's already taken part in the reviews and competencies you've got set up. So always use version control and update that way. Scheduling with your workshops. Do you need to be doing any rescheduling, replanning, changing any dates? And that might be something that you need to consider. And also creating new groups for any new starts on programs, for all of your new cohorts that's coming on. That's another thing that you'll need to consider. So we always encourage pre-planning in advance. So planning, preparation, process, the 3 Ps is what we would always encourage towards year end and throughout the year as well. Just a couple more things to consider as well. So account management around your admin accounts, your learner accounts, and also your employer accounts. So make sure that you're archiving any business leavers, all of your admin accounts for any people that's left your business. Also, if you do have any business leavers, if they were champions or super users, are you making sure that other people are being retrained or have been allocated to those roles to continue to develop Aptem, and you don't have sort of a gap in that process going forward? With regards to R14, we would always encourage in-year management of your Power BI reports. Don't wait until it gets to sort of year end and then start looking at your QAR reports in Power BI and your accountability framework. We would always encourage you to be using those in year, every month, getting used to those reports to stay on top of your reconciliation, your DLOCs, your FRMs. If you do spot any data queries, report them immediately to the ESFA to make sure that you'll get any reconciliation paid back in year before R14. Anything reported after R14, you'll struggle on getting back from them. So that's just another reason to be using these reports throughout the year. And just to make sure that your reporting is reflective of your current delivery as well, so you've not got any unexpected clawback once R14 goes in, and to make sure that you're maximising your QAR and it is reflective of your actual delivery. Make sure that you process any of your process automation trackers. We always encourage this to be part of everybody's workflow. If you're responsible for creating, authorising, processing your trackers, you should be logging in and just checking to see if there's any new ones coming through for yourself, if there's any outstanding ones that still need to be processed. You don't want to be caught out with any, say, ILR trackers or withdrawal trackers that still sitting there waiting just to be processed and authorised prior to going into R14. So these are all key factors. If it's not within your workflow, make sure that it is, every couple of days or whenever you can fit it into your workflow. Make sure that you are processing your process automation trackers, and make sure going into the ILR every month they have been cleared. Okay, next we're going to discuss some updates to the Power BI report, and this is where I will hand over now to Georgina, who will discuss the changes that's been made. Georgina, I think you're on mute.
Well done, Ange. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to concentrate on the quality Power BI report. And we've made a number of recent enhancements to this report in Aptem to help people get to the data behind the metrics presented, which is really important throughout the year, but especially important as you plan for your year end. The main enhancement is to your QAR headline data tab, which is the one I'm showing on the screen in the quality Power BI. This tab's designed to give you an indication of your QAR for the last few years, along with an indication of performance in the current year. It's always been possible to filter by age, gender, ethnicity, and programme. And it's also been possible to view the data that contributed to the completed programmes by downloading the underlying data, which used to be contained in a grey bar at the top right-hand side of the screen. However, this data didn't used to include the in-learning learners, which are probably the most significant learners to be aware of at this stage, since they will impact whether you achieve minimum, expected or maximum QAR rates as displayed in the bar charts. Maximum assumes that all learners in learning with a planned end date in the current year achieve in year. So knowing who the learners are that need to complete to achieve this value can really support your team to target and support them if necessary to maximise your QAR data. So to support you in identifying your in-scope learners, the underlying data has been moved from the grey bar at the top of the screen and relocated to a learner aims table at the bottom of the screen. The learner aims table contains key metrics, summary totals, and detailed information for each learner related to the learning performance and achievements, and it now includes both completed and in-learning learners. New filters have been introduced to further support an administrator being able to narrow down the relevant learners according to the specific criteria. As with other reports, the filtered data view can be exported into Excel for further analysis if this is required by hovering over the top right-hand corner of the table and selecting the download option. Move on, Ange, to the next screen. As well as making the learner aims table visible on the QAR headline tab, there's also been 5 new columns added right at the right-hand side. And these are learner count, completed, achieved, withdrawn, and in learning. These will assist with identifying the learners in the summary table without the need to locate the data within different tabs or different Power BIs in Aptem. We can see on this example that the figures in the table exactly match the summary figures for the current year. And I do apologise for my number of in-learning. This is a test tenant where we haven't been completing many of the learners. New filters have also been added to the learning aims table, and they will allow you to filter by learning status and hybrid end year. So you could select your in-learning learners for the current academic year and you will then get a filtered list of my 625 learners that need to complete before year end. This will allow you to target support to your relevant learners. You'll be able to easily view your withdrawn or achieved learners, target support for your in-learning learners to make a maximum positive contribution towards your QAR dataset. Just note, the new filters won't change the 3 bar charts and the summary table, which will continue to reflect all in-scope learners. They only apply to the learners aims table. They're there to allow you to drill down the data to what you need to see. Over the next tab, Ange. In addition, the Learner Data Table tab in the Quality Power BI has been renamed to Learner Data, and this also has new filters added so you can identify learners by hybrid end year. So we always had start, planned, and actual, but you've now got a new filter for hybrid. However, you may still see differences in the learner numbers between the Learner Data tab and the QAR headline tab. And this is because the QAR Learner Aims table is based on the main aim for a learner within each hybrid end year, whereas the Learner Data tab is the current status of the learner on their latest programme episode. But by moving the Learner Data table into the main QAR tab, you should be able to much easier find your in-scope learners. And while we're considering the Power BI quality dashboard, there's been a number of other updates which I'd like to draw your attention to. They're all outlined in the July 2024 Release 1 notes, which are available on the Help Centre. The age band filters in the QAR have been set to match the current government categories, ensuring you can have consistency as how data is categorised and analysed, providing you with more accurate and relevant insights. Some of you may have noticed previously that there have been inconsistencies or errors in the date and time information on downloaded data due to differences in time zone settings, mainly due to daylight saving time, when data was downloaded from Power BI. This has now been rectified to ensure that all significant data are recorded and exported in a standardised format that's not influenced by time zone discrepancies. And there's also 2 further tabs on the quality dashboard that have been updated, which are the contract and performance tabs. These tabs are designed to allow you to stay up to date with the latest ESFA contract and qualification achievement rates effortlessly for your organisation. And we've now incorporated automatic updates to seamlessly integrate the most current government data, ensuring you always have the latest insights. We've also introduced new filtering options on these tabs, allowing you to easily refine your results by year. And additionally, the funding values table now show convenient subtotals, simplifying the process of tying specific filters to the overarching contract metrics. These latest enhancements to the quality of dashboard have been made to enhance efficiency and precision in tracking and analysing your data. I'm now going to hand back to Angela, who's going to look at some of the other ILR updates that we've made for the new academic year.
Thanks, Georgina. Okay, so following the update last night, there have been some changes throughout to support your reporting in 24-25. And as Georgina referred to, these are all in the release notes, so you can go there and view them in the Help Centre. So firstly, the 24-25 schema is now available when exporting your ILR batch. So this will now enable you to start to prepare your data ready for your r14 submission. So you can continue to report for r14 and also continue to report for your r13 going forward, your r12 and 13 going forward. This does mean, however, that 22-23 is no longer available in the export there, because obviously that's now closed and we're moving forward. You'll also notice that there's an option to force include your aims in the ILR into the 24-25 batch file. This is listed against each aim within the Edit ILR section in Classic interface. So you'll now be able to do that and force things into the batch for the coming year. Also, when building programs, the ILR token will now include the option to select 24-25 schema, and we have removed the option to select 22-23 schema within the ILR token. Okay, further changes around the 24-25 schema. When returning your organisation file, your continuing learners will obviously be reported in 24-25 to ensure your correct level of funding is returned for your learner cohorts. The 24-25 migration schema will follow the 23-24 specification, but we have made the following exceptions. Anyone with any aims with a programme type of 24, traineeships have now been removed from the ILR specification. So that is one of the exceptions that will not be going forward, along with framework code and pathway code frames with funding model 25 and programme type 31 to ensure your T-level data reporting. Let's just flip back. T-level data reporting is all accurate for the coming year. Other exceptions are employment outcome, destination and progression entity. These exceptions won't be migrated, and this is to ensure accurate reporting in compliance with funding regulations and proper funding claims for all of your learning cohorts. Okay. So, other recommendations for you. So the things that we would expect you to be doing monthly and in-year activity is to start planning ahead, to start developing your programs, and as we've mentioned, allowing time for any qualification requests within Aptem to be requested via Zendesk, your ticketing service in Help Centre, to ensure that we get your qualification builds signed off in time for your onboarding onto the new programs. So we would expect you to be doing that in year. Also, stay informed of Aptem updates. The release notes are available on the Help Centre, and we do have our weekly webinars also available on the Help Centre as well. Any within our roadmap, so make sure you keep on top of that. So we've listed the web address for that there, so you can go on and view our roadmap if you haven't done already. And also considering business processes change. So following any updates in Aptem, have you considered any changes that are necessary towards your business processes? If there's changes in Aptem, then do you still continue to do things the same way? Do we need to get our champions in on that, our super users in on that, and discuss how we make those changes going forward? And is there any training then that's required for your staff following those changes? And as we've mentioned earlier, regular Power BI reporting to support funding, compliance and quality is essential throughout the year. We cannot stress the importance of understanding your data and to becoming familiar with those reports and how they work, so you can be using them regularly and they can be valuable towards your organisation. We've touched on your super users and champions. But are we maximising the potential for these within your business? The role of the champion and the super user, we think, is essential to supporting your changes and your functionality and development of Aptem, to avoid any additional training that you need. The champions can do that, and for any new staff, and making sure that your the changeover of staff training documentation is kept up to date as well. Champions should be managing your internal support process, so creating a central point for triaging and reporting any system queries that you've got coming through, and we always encourage that in implementation and then following implementation to be that first port of call for any queries around the system within your business. One of the other things that we also suggest is to develop internal FAQs for any common issues. Before you have to reach out to the Help Centre, is there anything that you could do internally just to make sure if it's repeated issues coming through? And then make use of the Help Centre documentation make sure you always do a search on there if there's any queries you've got around Aptem. A massive resource, and it's really, really helpful. We still use that ourselves on a daily basis, so we would always encourage you to go into the help centre. Aptem champions as well can also help to identify areas of CPD for standardisation across your staff and help to develop a training plan for staff. So are there particular areas of Aptem that are coming up as a bit of a problem for tutors or other staff in particular areas? So let's use that as CPD going forward, and get some training in on that, and encourage the use of Aptem webinars and again the help centre. Make sure that any system updates that happen are communicated out to your organisation. As we've said, the release notes are there and they're available on Aptem every time there's an update. So make sure that you're reviewing them and communicating any changes that may affect your business. If there are any changes to Aptem, we recommend creating an action log. If there's any queries that's being reported via the ticketing, definitely make an action log to make sure that you're keeping a record of the changes and to use that as development then going forward within your system. And then attend monthly meetings with your CSM. Champions, super users can allocate time to go to the meetings and any development following that. We would always encourage, if your staff are champions or super users, to have that as part of their job role, so that they have the time to be able to put all of those changes into place and help benefit you as a business to maximise the use of your system. Okay, so following what we've been through in the webinar, what we'd like you to do now is just take a few minutes to consider the key priorities that you had originally listed, that you were thinking about doing, that we asked you about at the beginning. And think about if you've made any differences. Is there anything that you would change now? And what we'd ask you to do is start putting your key priorities into the chat now. You know, if there's anything there that you feel we've not discussed yet, that we've not been through in the webinar, feel free to put that in the chat and we'll take that away and maybe develop future webinars on that basis. But what we'd like, the aim of today is really to get you thinking about what you considered with your priorities. Is there anything now new that you would want to do? So if anybody feels that they can put that in the chat, we'd like you to put that in now. And then we can discuss that for further projects. Is there anything coming through, Georgina, yet? You're muted.
I'm muted again. Sorry, Ange. Scared you too. Yeah, we do have a question we could answer while people are thinking about that. Or it's actually an observation that one of that Rebecca made about groups, particularly if you're moving learners between programs, and making sure that you don't inadvertently drop them out the ILR. We know a lot of you do have group structures whereby you exclude on groups to stop learners going into your ILR. So maybe you don't include onboarding groups in your ILR batch export. But if you have a learner who's progressing between levels, it may well be that you've moved them onto an onboarding program, but you still need to return their ILR for their main program up until the end of R14. So do be very careful if you are moving learners between programs and therefore groups, that you do still include their current year data right up until the end of R14, and you don't inadvertently move them into a group that you're not exporting during this period and have that data drop out of the ILR, because then you are going to have potential clawback issues. One suggestion is that you could potentially use parallel groups to have a holding group for those learners that you always export. But I would just say, definitely a really good observation that you make sure that you don't allow any group movements or group restrictions to inadvertently lose learners at this stage of the year, which would not be good for your funding. I don't know if you've got anything you want to add on that, Ange.
No, that's an excellent suggestion. Obviously, we always say groups first. We always check groups first if there's any queries around viewing learners. So yeah, that's an excellent observation.
Um,
Okay.
we've had a new question in from someone who's doing their first ILR year end in Aptem, and they're saying, how do we define the ILR for R13 and 14 with R01? I don't know if you want to sort of briefly discuss that, Ange,
Sorry, could you repeat
or
that,
if you,
Georgina? I dropped off a little bit
how,
then.
how do we define the year end, the sort of R13 and 14 ILR batches from the R01 for 24-25? I don't know if you want to take that or if you want me to pick that one up.
So within your ILR export, that you will have the option there to swap between the schemas, so you can select the different schema depending on which report that you want to run. So for while you're still reporting for 23-24, obviously you would select that schema when you run your ILR export. If you swap the schema out to 24-25, it will only bring in the learners that have started from August the 1st, 24, and any learning associated with that within that report. Is
And
there
just
anything else
just
you
a
wanted
quick
to expand on, Georgina?
Yeah, just a quick expansion on that. In that the 23-24 scheme, the 24-25 schema did become available as of the release last night. So you will now see that schema in your drop down. So when you go to get ILR batch and you get the little modal up with your filters, you will now see the option to do 23-24 and 24-25. There is another release at the end of the month, 31st of July, which will make 24-25 the default as we move into the 24-25 funding year. So at the moment, if you want to do an R01, you need to select 24-25, 23-24 will be your default. As we move into August, that will flip. And if you want to do R13 or 14, you need to default back to, you need to select 23-24 and 24-25 will become your default. So at the moment, it's there as an option, but it won't be defaulted. From August, we'll switch to make 24-25 the default in those batch exports.
I've
But you
just
should
had a
all be able
message.
to see that now.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. I've just had a message through to say that somebody who's on the webinar cannot actually type in the chat. So I'm not sure if we've got any advice around that. Is there anything we can do? Feel free to, it's come through on a Teams message to me, so feel
Yeah.
free to send it
That's
through to
that
me on Teams. If that's,
through Teams, or pop it in the questions because the questions do seem to be coming through.
oh, great stuff. Pop it in the questions then if you can't type in the chat. That's great. Okay. Is there anything else we need to address, Georgina, on that
Um,
one?
yeah, again, some people are saying they're using questions instead of chat. Questions do seem to be working. So if you are struggling with the chat and you have anything you want to add, please do pop it in the questions. Um,
Great stuff.
We don't have any other questions, I think, yet to answer. So just while we're waiting to see if there's any other final questions, if you just skip on a couple of slides, Angie, I just want to draw
Yep.
people's attention to some upcoming webinars we've got coming up. So next Thursday, we have got our second enhanced feature drop, which is a new exciting development, and that will be looking at virtual assistant and scenario-based checkpoints. If you haven't already registered for that webinar, please do. Really exciting developments. The virtual assistant, well, but yeah, and the scenario checkpoints are both things that will really be able to support your learners and your tutors in their delivery. So whether you're a current enterprise customer or not, please do have a look at that webinar and see if it's something you might be interested in adopting in the future. We have then got in August an update on our communications connector, which is our new connector with Teams. The uh, the that has been developing quite fast over the last few months. So it will be a summary of everything that's available and any future planned development. So that might be quite interesting if you're looking at doing the Teams integration with Aptem. And then we have a thought webinar in September on how to build the best in class progress reviews. So again, one of interest for anyone with sort of curriculum quality background, if you want to hear some advice on review building and what can be done with that one. So just three coming up. All our upcoming webinars are always on the website, on our website, and you will get invitations through as well for the relevant ones. But do please look out for those. Um, just have a quick glance through the questions to make sure there's nothing outstanding. Um, there was one final question I think is worth addressing from Rebecca about the schema on programs tab for the ILR. So if you change your schema tab on your programs, your ILR to 24, 25 now, um, anything you change in your ILR tab will only impact new learners on the program. It won't impact your existing learners, but those will change automatically come the 1st of August. And the system will recognise the start date of the program when you apply, and will apply the relevant schema. So if you are building a program now for 24, 25, and you need access to some of the ILR fields that only become available after the 1st of August, you can go and change the schema tab at your program level. But you certainly do not need to go into every single program and flip it forward to next year. When we do the second release at the end of the month, that will all happen behind the scenes for you, and you'll be able to just seamlessly use your programs moving into the new academic year.
Anything else, Georgina? Is that it?
The last thing was one about a standard under review. If it's released in year, how it would affect current learners. And what I would say with standards is, please do, as soon as you get a new standard released, reach out to your CSM or the support team to ask for it to be built. And if you need support in adding that into existing programs, again, reach out to your CSM and they'll be able to discuss that one with you. But that, I think, is all our questions, Ange.
Great stuff. Okay then. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And all of the information in the webinar will be available in due course on the Help Centre.
Super.